Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being with us today and for making this a resource of your current discussion about tariffs, about the United States, and about specialty food. My name is Jose Lopez Ganem, and I am the Executive Director of the Fine Cacao and Chocolate Institute. Today, it's April 30th. We have been already a quarter into this year, and there's a pressing topic, a pressing issue that brings a lot of businesses in Conizon in a pre-competitive conversation, which is, given the current climate of international trade, what small businesses, what independent businesses, what businesses thriving or wanting to have a particular discussion about specialty, taste, ethics, have in common facing trade tariffs. So I want to give a welcome to all our panelists, but before I start, I would also like to pass on the microphone to our co-organizer, our co-partner and friends from the Heirloom Cacao Preservation and its Executive Director, Anne Zaczek. Anne, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose. On behalf of the Heirloom Cacao Preservation Fund, we're pleased to welcome you all to this important discussion and honored to have such a knowledgeable group of experts and participants with us. Look forward to a meaningful conversation that sheds some light on challenges and opportunities that are facing the specialty cacao supply chain.
Thank you so much, and as always, it's such a pleasure to be in this conversation in Conizon with HCP, all its members, all its supporters, and of course, its wonderful team. One thing that we're going to be doing today is we're going to be hearing from our four panelists, and they have been provided with a set of questions that we ourselves at HCP and FCCI have been hearing from various stakeholders around the supply chain. Even educated consumers have reached out with the one question is, how expensive it is going to be, or should I move all my business to an undisclosed location in some paradise-like destination that will be exempt from tariffs in the foreseeable future? But for this, we have brought together a series of professionals that are really, what I will say, on the trenches, and not necessarily just dealing with the conversation of bringing soft commodities, specialty commodities, or foodstuff into the United States, but also providing services in equipment, in different ways to actually transform these foodstuffs into service products, into experiences, and into further manufactured goods, because this is also a place that these tariffs are being affected. We're going to hear from them in different periods, and they're going to be answering these questions, and then we're going to have a conversation guided by Anne, guided by myself, and guided by our speakers in what it comes to the takeaways or their main silver linings that we might be finding during this time. Without further ado, I would like to welcome a friend and a colleague from, I will say, not so far away from where FCCI is based in the state of Massachusetts, but this one in the state of New Jersey. Bhavani Veerapaneni, who is the mastermind behind Diamond Custom Machines DCN. Bhavani, thank you so much for kicking us off, specifically in a place that we might not imagine that there is tariffs, but I think of stainless steel, and now I'm a little bit panicked with what's coming your way.
Yeah,
Welcome, Bhavani.
thank you very much, and such an honor to be among such a wonderful panel. And such a joy to be here today. Thank you for inviting me and having me here. And looking forward to learning from the rest of the panel and see what their challenges are. Sometimes you're in the trenches and you're trying to do things that you know best, but sometimes it's, focused in your world. But to hear from others who are experienced in a whole different category of products and things like that is something very interesting. And thank you for the opportunity.
Bhavani, I would like to start asking you a couple of questions. The first one is, how has your business been affected by the ongoing threat or this brief imposition of tariffs on and off?
Yeah, so the one thing that we're seeing now is even though the tariffs have been paused, except for China, we're seeing our suppliers increasing their prices, even though they're not directly connected to China. So we're seeing at least a 8 to 10% raise in prices of some of the components that we buy, say we buy some of our motors from Japan, some components from Germany, even though they're not impacted by tariffs as of day today, we're seeing that impact. We're seeing a price increase. So I see two things happening. I see one is I think people are worried what it's going to be, so they're trying to increase their revenue now so they can cushion whatever the impact that's going to happen. So they're trying to buffer up their cash reserves. So they're trying to get as much money as they can and quickly. So they're raising prices. As in tariff has become an excuse or a reason for them to do that, even though some of it has been pushed off for a little bit. But we're seeing that, and we're feeling it on a day-to-day basis. That's been a big impact. And the other thing is, we also, not only that we manufacture a lot of goods in the US, but we also import a lot of goods. So what's happening with this situation of, the on again and off again situation with tariffs. So my situation was my products at one time got stuck in this on again and off again situation. So the custom systems didn't work. So any codes we put in were rejected. So the stuff ended up staying in storage. So we ended up paying a higher cost on our goods to get it released from customs. So we had that uncertainty, which impacted us when we were importing goods. That was a direct impact. So those are the two big impacts we're seeing right now with what's going on with tariffs.
What strategies, Bhavani, are you foreseeing using today, short term, maybe tomorrow in a couple of weeks? We have 70 days from today's date for a new imposition or revision of tariffs. And maybe long term, are you thinking of DCM switching location and language to French, to Spanish, setting up shop somewhere else? What are these short, medium, and
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Right now, we're not doing anything because we're just waiting for the dust to settle. We just want to know. There's so much uncertainty in the market. We're not really sure how to pivot because for us to take a clear strategic decision, we need to know what the reality is. And it seems to be changing on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. And you can't, because some of the changes that we may make are, have impact over multiple years. It's not something that we can do something and then go back and do something else. So any decision that we're taking now, we're going to wait and see is our approach right now. We're waiting and seeing what's impacting us and how it's going to impact us. And based on, we need a steady environment. Once we have a steady environment, then we'll be able to figure out how to navigate that environment. Right now, the environment is very uncertain, is the word I would like to use. And because of the uncertainty, it doesn't give us a certainty of which direction we should go. So that's for us right now, the strategy short term is at least wait and see. Long-term decisions will all be based on how things shake out moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, I'll download Rosetta Stone or Duolingo or whatever the favorite app these days. Bhavani, what are you hearing from the purveyors, the person that tells you the rocks, the steel, the machinery? What are the main questions to you at the moment?
So I think there are two questions that I keep getting, asked, thank God for now, we have an inventory buffer. So we're not, at the point where, we're getting hit by that. Because of that, what's happening is that we're able to hold our prices. With regards to a lot of my customers, what they're saying is, hey, can you move operations to either Canada or to Mexico or somewhere else? And the reason is, hey, if I have to import, say, motors from Japan, and there's a 10-20% tariff on those motors that I'm importing, and then I'm making a finished product, and now I'm shipping it to, say, Italy, and Italy has a reciprocal tariff on the goods. Now the cost of goods has gone up 40-50%. And some of these numbers that we're hearing are even more crazier than that. So if the prices go up 100% because of tariffs and reciprocal tariffs, then we can't compete. We're out of business, So then the situation is, should you move operations to either Mexico or Canada because they are neighbors? When we do that, then all those tariff questions go away. Then you're still competitive. You're still being able to compete with the rest of the world, and you're able to present a product that doesn't just shoot up in price, right? So I think what the tariffs are doing are maybe counter. It's not really helping, I think, in bringing manufacturing back, but it may actually push some of the manufacturing, especially small guys like us who can't take the hit, to see, hey, can we do something else in some other places? Because it's all about, it's a global economy, and we can't do everything. We all rely on who's the best in the industry in where they are. Say some of the components, the best components come from Germany. Some of the best components come from, Japan. Some of the best components come from Italy. Some of the best components come from the US. So we bring everything together and we put it together as a machine. And when we do this, what happens is, if we're getting hit, say if even though we're a US-based company and we're buying US-based components, those components, the stuff that gets into those components are purchased from overseas. So those prices are going up, right? So, which is causing a lot of, a domino effect. And then the quickest way to offset that is, hey, could you just move to Mexico? Could you just move to Mexico or even Canada, right? And looks like Canada is becoming very business friendly, and so is Mexico. And like you were saying, like Rosetta Stone, should we learn other languages? Because manufacturing, in the end, is about how can you be nimble and how can you react, and at the same time be competitive in a global marketplace. And instead of helping manufacturing come back to the US, it may actually drive it away. And if it's not carefully done. So I think that's what, we're hearing from customers. They're saying, hey, can you ship it from anywhere else? Can you ship it from Canada? Can you ship it from some other country? So we don't have to deal with this, is a question that's coming up all the time. So that'll be a big question for us moving forward on a strategy standpoint. Like, hey, is the strategy going to be how the rest of the world behaves to what US is behaving? It's all behavioral, right? So based on the behavior of other countries, capital moves. Capital is very movable. It's people may not be able to move, but capital moves. And if the environment in the US is not very conducive to capital, it's gonna move. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. So that's the kind of thought process that's happening. I don't know if that answers your question. It's a long-winded answer to the question, but I'm just going with the flow here.
One thing that you have touched based on not only your purveyors, but also your customers, one thing that this particular infomercial or this webinar is trying to tackle is, what would you like to tell your customers today, Bhavani, that they can do for DCM, or what they can expect from DCM in this period of uncertainty? What is your message to them?
Right. I think these are very uncertain times. So the one thing we're trying to do is we're trying to be very certain in these uncertain times. So we are not raising our prices. We're taking a lot of the shocks that we're hitting right now, that's hitting us right now, but we won't be able to do it long term. For short term, we can do it, but long term, we won't be able to do it. But so I think what I would like to tell our customers is be patient. Stay calm, don't panic. I see a lot of panic going on because the uncertainty creates a lot of panic, right? So I would say don't panic. Stay calm and look at how things are going to shake out. Look where the dust settles. And once the dust settles, then you'll be able to make very informed decisions on how to navigate. I mean, we're all entrepreneurs. We're all started with bootstrap, shoestrings. We started with almost nothing. So for us, the thing is, how do we navigate? For us to navigate, I think the key is we need to know where we're going and how we're going. And for that, we need some kind of stability. Right now, the stability is what the question is, in my mind.
Absolutely. Is there any other policy, any other effect in the world that is causing you to tremble beyond the tariffs? Anything that you have been carrying historically that you say this was already in the back burner?
Right. I think there are two things that are really in my mind that's bothering me is this world order that's been in existence for, I don't know, 100 years, 70, 80 years is kind of changing very rapidly. And that change, the impact of the change is something that's, we don't know how it's going to be. So the uncertainty of that is the issue. So if there's a government organization, or if the government wants to do something, I think what they need to do is they need to bring stability. Right now, there's no stability in the marketplace. The ground is shaking underneath it, and that stability needs to be in place. And once the stability is in place, then the businesses can flourish. If the stability is not there, then you don't know how to navigate. So I know I keep going back to the navigation question as a word, but that's how I can equate it to, because we're all trying to figure out how this all impacts us. And for us to impact us, if it's a game of chess, we need to know where coins are going to be, so you know how to play the game. But right now, the coins are being changed on a daily basis. So I think that's one of my biggest concerns, is that it's not stable. That needs to be quickly stabilized. That needs to happen, is one thing. And the second thing, if you ask me, is that, I don't want to sound political. I know this is an economic discussion, but I think policy and politics come into play. And I think the world is getting less tolerant, and I think that's another issue that we're facing. It's getting more dictatorial, I don't know if that's the word. That is also not really good for business and for economy. Free markets and free trade, or if not free, but some kind of a constrained trade that's really thought through and well managed, is what needs to happen, not something that happens, one day this and tomorrow it's something else. And that's too much of a shift, is where I would, something of a policy kind of, answer that I have. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does. And I do think economical and political always go back hand in hand. As a matter of fact, they have adjoining departments here at Boston University. So I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they've been talking to one another. Bhavani, any silver lining of all of this? Anything that you have?
Oh yeah. I see a lot of positive things happening, especially for small makers. The rise in cacao prices. I mean, if you look at 5, 10 years ago, um, the small chocolate makers were focused on environment and also flavor. Was it two weapons that they would market their product on? Hey, look, I'm supporting the small farmer, I'm environmentally friendly, and I'm producing an ethical product, and look at the taste of it. But the price is higher, right? It was always higher. So that was a hurdle that the small manufacturers had to face. But now with the rising cacao prices, what's happening is I see what's going on with the couverture market, and you see what the couverture guys are charging for their cacao. Now, all of a sudden, your bean-to-bar market maker also has an economical argument that they did not have before, right? So now what you're seeing is people who do their own chocolate saying, hey, if I buy some machines and if I can make my own chocolate, now there's no excuse. I can do it. I have great providers of amazing cacao, like Uncommon Cacao, and there's so many other providers that provide amazing cacao, and I can provide a very high quality product, ethically, environmentally friendly, and I can provide it at a value that I can compete with these big houses that I didn't have before. That, I think, is a huge silver lining that I'm seeing. And I see this trend happening in some markets more than others. I see France is one of the markets that I see where people are like, hey, instead of buying couverture at this price, I can make my own, because now it's, for a small business, cash flow is everything. So now they're putting out cash out front. Now, if you have to buy a minimum amount of quantities of X amount of cacao of couverture, now they're saying, no, I don't have to buy that. And I don't have to buy a minimum order quantities of 5 or 7 or 8 different varieties. Now I can stock 2 or 3 beans, and I can make my own couverture of all these different varieties. Now my cash flow is much more manageable than being outlet. So it's actually helping small businesses to be able to navigate. So I'm seeing a positive side to that. That I would say is a silver lining. And the other silver lining I would say is, hey, it keeps you on your toes, it makes you get your mind sharp and try to figure out how to do this, So those are the two things I would like to.
Thank you so much, Bhavani. We'll return for the conclusion statements. I will say a silver lining might have been moving to Mexico, less snow shoveling over there than in New Jersey or in Massachusetts. Well, we will see. We will see if that materializes. Speaking of cacao, its opportunities and its many challenges, prices, EUDR regulations in the European Union, climate crisis, and now this. I would like to invite to the podium our friend and colleague Emily Stone from Uncommon Cacao. Emily, feel free to take it as you said, with vivency. I'm happy to ask questions, but also happy for you to take it over.
Sounds great. Thank you, Jose, and thank you to FCCI and HCP for organizing this webinar. I think it's a great opportunity to learn from each other also in this space. I just learned a lot already from what Bhavani shared, and yeah, really honored to be here alongside Ori, Yelena, and Bhavani to share what we've been seeing, experiencing. I did kind of write stuff down ahead of time with the questions, so maybe for the sake of time, I'll just run through that based on what you just asked, Bhavani. Yeah, my name's Emily Stone. I'm the CEO of Uncommon Cacao. We are a specialty cacao importer, bringing in amazing, unique cacao beans from over 17 countries, and supplying many of the craft and bean-to-bar chocolate makers here in the US, but also globally. We have an office in Europe, and we also ship all over the world. I think, we have pretty strong views on the tariffs at Uncommon Cacao, and I want to just call this what it is, which is a new tax on Americans. American businesses, small and large, and ultimately American families are the ones who are footing the bill for this new trade policy. I also want to be clear that the tariffs have not been paused. There is a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs at the levels that were initially announced, but we are still paying 10% tariffs on every single container of cacao that we're bringing in this year. So the universal 10% is very much in effect. And as has been alluded to already, it really has added insult to injury for the chocolate industry, which has been going through a heck of a 2-year volatile period with the price rally that we've seen in the futures market. I also want to just state for the record that cocoa cannot be sourced from the United States in the quantities needed for chocolate production. There are about 4.5 million tons of cocoa or cacao produced globally. And between the production in Puerto Rico and Hawaii, there's about 100 tons of production. So that is literally not less than 1%. It's less than 0.01%. It's not even a rounding error when it comes to global production. So there's no domestic cacao producing industry that's being protected by the tariffs. This policy makes no sense for the chocolate industry. All of our incoming cacao to the US, anything that was on the water after April 5th, will be slapped with a 10% tariff on top of what are already the highest prices for cacao that we have ever paid. A third consecutive year of a global shortage of cacao drove prices up for the raw material used to make chocolate to over $12,000 per ton. This was quadruple the average prices that had been paid for the last half a century. So average prices of around $3,000 per ton up until 2024, when it shot up to $12,000 per ton. So we're talking about an industry that has already been navigating extremely choppy waters with supply scarcity, working capital needs increasing by more than 300%, liquidity challenges for larger players in the industry, really big challenges with margin calls to manage through price risk of the price rally, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Climate change, EUDR, and the list goes on. And I can say that the stress and uncertainty in the craft chocolate industry in the US is palpable. We've seen a few smaller makers decide to shut down over the last several months instead of continuing to battle through these challenges, which is really heartbreaking because these companies were making exceptional chocolate. As folks in the universe of craft chocolate know, every single maker has their own unique processes, their own style, and are just making chocolates that you literally can't find elsewhere. So it's really sad to see. That's not to say that everyone is struggling. In fact, we've heard from many of our customers that this was the best first quarter that they've ever had. So, there are silver linings, and I'll get to those in just a minute. But one challenge that we've been hearing from our customers that we weren't expecting to see them face so early is the impact of the China-specific tariffs on their packaging purchases. So ships that were en route to the US with specialty foils and boxes for US chocolate makers this month literally turned around mid-shipment and returned to China because of the tariffs. So these are products that are not made in the United States that companies rely on in order to get their products to market. And as Bhavani mentioned, many of the other components that would even be required to try to build a factory to make these foils come from other countries. And so just the interconnection of our supply chains are not just limited to one of the raw materials. There's also packaging, equipment, sugar, and the list goes on. And it's unclear how our sector is going to navigate through the packaging challenges, which I think are very, very serious, especially since the cost of packaging was already higher than the cost of cocoa beans for many craft chocolate makers. And I completely agree with Bhavani as well. The just general environment of uncertainty and unpredictability represents another source of real harm. It's been really hard to figure out how to price our cacao through the really volatile futures prices in the world market and shifts of over 250% from suppliers within the course of a single year. And now it's really hard to know what economic factors might even change between when we contract for cacao and when the cacao eventually lands in the US. We're right in the middle of buying season across many of the countries where we source cacao. So containers will be shipping soon from Belize, Guatemala, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Colombia, and Peru, just to name a few. And all of those will face the 10% tariffs. So that means we are going to be passing that on to our customers. We have no choice based on our business model and the margins that we make as an intermediary in the supply chain rather than a final consumer product company. So we have been hearing from some of our partners that they're working with their national governments to push back on the tariffs. We know that PISA, for example, has been lobbying alongside the Ministry of Agriculture in Haiti. Maya Mountain has been working with the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Trade in Belize. We imagine that many other efforts are happening in other cacao growing countries. And we're hopeful that those efforts will be successful, as right now the message is there's no exemption for any raw materials. There's no exemption for cacao. There's no exemption for green coffee, even though these products, again, cannot be sourced in the United States. And so it has to be this country-specific negotiation strategy. We'll see. We have been searching for possible silver linings to the tariffs, and I completely agree with Bhavani that there have been real opportunities emerging for the US craft chocolate industry, really driven more by the price rally than by tariffs. But just the consumer perception of price difference between now bulk chocolate or more sort of bulk premium chocolate and craft chocolate has never been smaller, while the quality of product, is really high for craft chocolate. So the value consumers are getting by choosing craft chocolate is continuing to grow. In addition to that, one chocolate maker brought up to us a silver lining, which is that importing chocolate will now be much more expensive. So many of the nationally distributed brands of premium chocolate that American consumers are used to seeing on the supermarket shelves are actually brands that remelt chocolate that they import or couverture that they remelt or even just repackage for sale in the United States. So these, the tariffs will make importing that chocolate more expensive and will increase the competitiveness of manufacturers that truly are manufacturing from bean to bar here. Yes, the 10% tariffs will be in effect on the beans, making prices, costs and prices higher, but 10% on beans instead of 10% on finished product will, potentially make a difference. Another random silver foil lining that we've heard from folks in Europe is that now their market is flooded with cheap Chinese packaging options. So those were rerouted from the States to China. And so, we have an office in Europe. So maybe we'll see our European business continuing to grow. I guess just to, finish off here, you could say that one other small beacon of hope is that chocolate tends to be really resilient during times of economic downturns. We just have to hope that this will continue to be the case. during the current turbulence. And I also just want to shout out to Canada, because we're really grateful that Canada has not put any tariffs on cocoa bean imports at this time. So way to go, Canada. Overall, we're continuing to do the work that we've always done, sourcing high quality cacao through transparent trade, providing the best possible service that we can in supporting chocolate makers. So we really encourage makers to reach out to us, ask us questions, work together on plans for this year, and also contact your representatives in Congress and let them know how tariffs are affecting you and your business. We've been using fivecalls.org to find contact information, and there's a lot of great detail on that site specifically related to tariffs that you can pull up and have a conversation with your electeds about. The more of us who are speaking out about this, the better. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was very powerful, and thank you so much for calling us also for action in different avenues that we often explore. I am very interested to hear about the packaging. We know from FCCI, from the market research that we do, that marketing is basically the driving motivator at the moment for a lot of the chocolate sales. Of course, beyond the storytelling and the product itself, it is definitely a business card that speaks volumes to different customers in all different marketplaces. And again, I don't know if the office in Europe is going to grow. Spain, Portugal, excellent places to not shovel snow, specifically in the mid regions, if you're looking for somewhere to go, as well as Bhavani. In order for us not to silo the conversation, it's really easy for us to continue talking cacao and chocolate. The ingredients that go into these bars, either if they are from a purist approach or they actually continue carrying on flavors, has been now taken over by really our cousins or brothers and sisters in the aisle of responsible and ethical spice trade. So we wanted to invite to this conversation also a colleague and friend, Ori Zohar from Burlap and Barrel. Ori, you and I have been in conversation already about this, but please illustrate us of how this is playing out on your side of the game.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And it's an honor to follow Emily and Bhavani, and I can't wait to hear from Yelena. And I just wanted to share a little bit about our perspective on this, just because we feel very adjacent and that we're chewing on similar things. And I wanted to just share a little bit about kind of how we're thinking about the tariffs in the current economic climate, and then just share a little bit about some thoughts and some advice on what I think some other folks in a similar position can kind of think and do for themselves to kind of make the most of this wild and unpredictable environment. So my name is Ori Zohar. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Burlap and Barrel. We do single origin spices. We work directly with smallholder spice farmers in 30 countries now. We work with them to grow, clean, dry, grind, blend, and export spices in each of their countries, which means that the farmers make a lot more money. And we get this like really clean chain of custody all the way back to the farm. So excellent farmers, direct relationship with the farms. And like everyone in the cacao industry, there is virtually no domestic spice industry. Sure, there's some garlic and herbs and chilies that grow domestically, but think about some of the most iconic American spices. Apple pie is not apple pie without cinnamon, and there's no domestic cinnamon. Vanilla ice cream, nobody grows vanilla in America. Even our favorite American hot dogs, what gives them their signature flavor? Coriander. Anyway, the point is that like cacao, there is no domestic alternative. And if the stated point of all these tariffs is to kind of repatriate supply chains, all that it means in the world of cacao and the world of spices is that things will become more expensive and less available. And so it really feels like a net loss. To that end, I do have some kind of hope and prayer to the current administration or whoever the higher powers are above it, that there will be some agricultural exemption, specifically where just the tariffs are purely punitive. And like Bhavani said, in our business, we're trying to figure out what is the right commitment and statement to make in this time where it feels like there's a meaningful threat against small businesses, specifically that are working with ingredients and supply chains that don't exist domestically. So we've made two commitments publicly. Number one, as we said, we're not going to ask our partner farmers to cover the cost of the tariffs. The partner farmers are doing their part. They're growing things well. We're not asking them to make less money because the US government has changed its policy. And then number two is we said that we're not going to increase prices due to tariffs to our customers. When we did the math, we looked at this, and we have many lines of our business. We looked in our e-commerce. direct to consumer business. And we were like, we can eat some things here. What it's going to mean is that we're going to spend less money hiring. We cut our innovation portfolio. We had all these chef collaborations. We want to do an advent calendar with spices, but the packaging comes from China. And so we've been really a lot more conservative, and we've been kind of doubling down on our core lineup. And so the irony here is that in order to pay for the tariffs, we're going to be cutting U.S. spending, which is silly and definitely not the intended consequence. And I think that us, like many other businesses that are going to be listening to this, are all-star American businesses. We are fully American employers. Our customer support team is domestic. We do a ton of value add domestically, and we put so much money in the hands of the USPS, the UPS, and FedEx. And so that's what's going to suffer for all of this. And so what we have been thinking about with all the tariffs is that no knee-jerk reactions. I think that as we've learned from this administration, what they say they're going to do and what they actually do, often there's a huge kind of gap in between them. But like Emily said, there is already a 10% tariff that's in play, and we're going to have to eat that, and that's going to have to come out of somewhere. Number two is we try to really do the math on what the tariff will be. And so I think that at origin, work as much as you can to separate value-added services from the cost of the core ingredients and separate it out as much as possible. And what we realize is that there is a lot of value. So it's not a 10% tariff on everything. It's a 10% tariff on our ingredients. That is a huge cost, don't get me wrong. But when we started calculating that out, we felt a little more comfortable, at least in e-commerce, kind of in our direct-to-consumer, eating some more of that cost. And just one of the other big things that we're looking at is we're trying to see where do we have kind of higher margin spices. We're going to double down on those. Where do we have more domestic value add, where more of the price is kind of domestically. So I think that one of the advantages that small businesses have is that these like giant scaled businesses have no operating margin and no room to move things around. Yes, they have money for lobbyists in DC, and yes, they have all these other big relationships, but they're not flexible with their supply chain, with their products, with how they do. And so we're really trying to ask ourselves, what are our highest margin products? What are our most value added products? And we're going to really put those in the spotlight for marketing and for all of that. The other thing that we did is we did a tariff sale. It started as a spring sale. We were a little bit overstocked, from Q4. And so we did a tariff sale. And what we saw in a week, we did a lot of sales, and customers really responded. We said, hey, we want to be in a strong cash position because we don't know what's going to go on. So just to share, like our first initial knee-jerk reaction was like immediately raise prices, which by the way, will often price you out of the market. Let other people raise prices, these giant companies that have no room to move, and find ways where we can kind of delay that as much as possible. And like we said, there will be some like price parity between way lower quality product and what you're doing. And hopefully that'll open you up to a lot of new customers. No, and then number two is we didn't start stocking up because it's hard to know what's actually going to happen here. And we were worried that we'd hit this like worst of all scenarios where we stocked up as a knee-jerk reaction, got hit by tariffs, and then the tariffs went away. And then, we would still be on that higher cost basis. So we're like, let's sell through our inventory to the extent that we feel comfortable. And let's do a sale to kind of incentivize customers. And then the last thing that we did is we spoke really honestly and openly with all of our customers. We have a big e-commerce business. It's about 70% of our revenue. I think that a lot of companies are trying to put kind of a strong face and all that, but we actually found that we said, hey, we're in an uncertain environment. It feels like the government is coming after small businesses. You, dear customers, have a big opportunity now to influence which companies kind of make it through this turbulent and unpredictable time. And we're going to do a little bit of a sale to make it easy to do this thing that we're asking you to do. So we asked our customers to buy and stock up now before all the kind of tariff-loaded inventory hits. We asked our customers to share with friends, which they definitely did. And so that really helped us. And now we have our businesses in a better cash position, and then we can decide how and when and where to deploy that cash to help us kind of navigate through this uncertain environment. I wanted to just share 3 strategies overall for businesses. One is I just wanted to say, we're all exhausted from this. I know, especially in the cacao industry, prices have been crazy. The last thing we need is tariffs on top of all of this. So just first acknowledge that this is exhausting, and that I think especially entrepreneurs that have smaller businesses, we don't have as many resources to lean on. So like take a step back, breathe, don't operate from a moment of fear, sit back, think about what the strategy is, what your unique strengths are, what our flexibility is, and where we can pivot. And just don't operate from a point of fear, because I think that's how a lot of companies really make a lot of mistakes. That's more of a psychological thing than a business thing, but it's really helped to kind of take a second and be like, wait a second, where can we outmaneuver the rest of the industry, which, by the way, is facing these same challenges? You know, us and McCormick are both facing the same tariffs. The difference is that we're a small and nimble company that can kind of be really creative about how all this happens. And then I think the second point on that is that in this time of uncertainty, consumer purchasing behavior is changing. And so it's a chance for you to actually talk to customers and grab more market share while people are actually saying, wait a second, Hershey's just went up, or this other cost went up, or all this. So how can you say, great, now that we're the same price, you should definitely be choosing our chocolate because you're getting a way better value. The second broad kind of point here is that I think that this doubles down on how important it is to build direct supplier relationships, either through people that you're purchasing the cacao from, work with them to make direct relationships. Because what we saw is that often companies domestically are buying from brokers who are buying from importers, who are buying from this, who are buying from that. When you're kind of really far away from the origin, your other bigger customers are going to scoop your supply and scoop your inventory. Because we have direct farmer relationships, we were able to really keep our supply chains up and running. You don't have to do it all yourself, but you can still build these more direct relationships through other intermediaries. And so you can work with them and kind of secure your supply so that some bigger buyer, I heard stories in the pandemic of like Walmart scooping full containers out of the supply chain because they're Walmart, and who's going to say no to them? I think the third thing is that often people have been really relying on grocery stores as sales channels, and I know that so much of the purchasing and happens in grocery. But I would also just really recommend to double down on an e-commerce relationship. Us being able to talk directly to our customers and us being able to sell directly to our customers have meant that we can control price, we can control SKUs, we can control inventory. So for example, in the pandemic, we ran out of a lot of stuff, but we kept just like bringing different spices on from here and from there and from domestic spices and whatever we could. And we'd be like, don't look at this thing that's sold out over here. Look at this brand new thing that we did. And in a grocery store shelf, if you're sold out, you're sold out. I know that's really hard to get them to swap out SKUs and all that. And it really gave us a lot of an excuse to talk to our customers. We shared honest stories. Me and my co-founder each wrote emails and made the case. And hopefully it's a chance to like buy brand love, because the CEO of that giant company isn't going to kind of give a little State of the Union and share and do all these other kind of delightful things. And so that's all I want to say, is that this is a crazy and wild and turbulent market. I would just say, don't take these tariffs seriously until they start hitting. And I know the 10% is coming, but just know that I think that once you start taking food away from Americans, that's when the revolution happens. So I think that there is a little bit of some kind of negotiating power here. Maybe we can't be lobbyists, but I do think that we can educate our customers and ask them to show up. 2 is take care of yourself, of your mental health, of all the stress. It's an insane and stressful time. So come and build from a point of strength, not from a point of fear. 3 is keep building direct supply chain relationships, because they will pay off in the short term and in the long term. And 4 is, I think that keep a kind of like varied business, because maybe consumers are getting taxed now, but maybe your e-commerce business can grow and you'll be able to avoid some of these other kind of, other kind of cost centers. So happy to talk a lot more about this and dig into any more of this stuff, but that's how we're trying to navigate this uncertain environment. It's really difficult, but I think that uncertainty also creates a lot of opportunity to build businesses and kind of shakes up people's purchasing behaviors where you can kind of step in and get into their lives.
Thank you so much, Ori. And I think also a very powerful message coming from different angles, seeing silver linings and the possibility to grab market share in terms of having a direct relationship and also taking a nap. What a very powerful message of take a nap before you do some sort of crazy business decision.
Totally.
We have gotten a melanger from Bhavani. We got some Maya Mountain beans from Emily Stone, some royal cinnamon, I believe, from Vietnam, from Ori, to make a delicious Mexican chocolate. And then we're gonna go to Yelena, and Yelena is gonna help us sell this brand. Yelena, you have heard a little bit of the components of the ingredients, but you're at the other end of the supply chain. You are bringing some of the most renowned chocolates from all over the world into the American market. You are at the specialty forefront. Not only you are seeing chocolate, you are seeing also some of these different products. Perhaps when Emily was talking about couverture, you have in your client roster Valrhona, probably one of the most important providers to fine dining in the United States. How are you doing, Yelena? What is coming your way, and what do you want to share with us today?
How am I doing? How much time do we have? Because that's it's been a tumultuous time. But before I get into that, I would love to thank this panel because I think everyone here has done just such a phenomenal job of clearly showcasing how knowledgeable you all are on this topic and passionate. And it's frankly really refreshing first because you really just did my job for me. And I don't know what else there is to say because you've covered so much of what I wanted to talk about so beautifully and artfully and compellingly. But, you know, it's really interesting because my experience has not been the same. I am a co-owner of Priori Specialty Foods, which is the importing arm of our business, who imports from well over 200 different suppliers, with about 70 of them we recently had to calculate being international suppliers from countries all over the world. We warehouse them in Salt Lake City, Utah, those goods in a single warehouse facility, and from there we distribute the product. So we have a distribution arm coast to coast and in Canada. And so that is our wholesale distribution arm. And then we also have a completely separate company, the Caputo's company, which is a consumer-facing company that is one of Priori's customers that showcases the breadth of the products we bring to the consumer. And so I have a really interesting, I think, vantage point that hopefully can offer because I am working with a lot of customers on a very wide range. That, as you can imagine, have a lot of concerns about how this is going to impact them. And the conversations that we've been having with those customers, as well as the purveyors that we work with, has definitely really triggered me back to the pandemic times. I mean, Jose, you and I kind of joked about this earlier. Ultimately, we as a company came out ahead, but it quite literally shaved years off the top and was not something I was looking forward to repeating. And a lot of the action that we're doing right now is really kind of striking a chord because we're in this really unique position of being the in-between for the purveyors who do tend to be very, panicked and fearful at this moment, with many of them being exclusive and us being their only gateway to a very, very critical market, the American market, in many cases, the entire North American market. As you can imagine, there's a lot to navigate there, a lot of fears, a lot of misconceptions. One of the biggest things that have been a challenge for me is actually educating myself to speak intelligently on this topic, because the number of misunderstandings, mischaracterizations has been vast. And I'm really, really grateful that, Emily, you took a minute to really highlight the fact that I think a lot of people did not understand when a pause was announced, is that the 10% base tariffs, the universal/base tariffs, I've heard both terms used, are very much in existence and have been, and we've verified those on the imports that have crossed the country since April 9th. We are actively paying an additional 10% tax because that came out of our pocketbook, the American-based company, and is going, may I add, on top of sector tariffs. I think that's important. Many of my suppliers didn't even know what sector tariffs were. It's something we take care of for them. In the world of chocolate, generally speaking, that will be 6% on a finished chocolate product. So when I'm talking tariffs, I'm really living now in the world of 16% as an absolute bare minimum. Now, quite almost comically, what we did as a response is kind of went back to those pandemic triggers and formulated a task force on our team to really try to address how we were going to get through this. Thankfully, like many of our panelists here, we are small, we are nimble. It is a savior to be able to react this quickly. As we were sitting in a meeting on April 9th to pass on our decisions about the reciprocal tariffs that were about to hit with all the various respective countries that we work with, that were being decided. Literally in that hour, the pause was announced. So when we walked out of the meeting with all of our reciprocal tariff decisions, we had to then undo all of the decisions. I'd like to think my silver lining is that, well, we're ready for when the big one strikes, should that pause be unpaused. And in that sense, we'll be ready to go. But it's been hectic. It's been incredibly challenging. We have decided ultimately to take a fairly, we call it a soft approach because we can't just apply this, this tax, if you will, unilaterally. There are so many factors to consider. We are working with some of the, smallest artisan producers in the world. And we do not view this as a zero-sum game. We can't just say, I'm sorry, Vietnam, your product is no longer going to be in my portfolio, and I'm just going to substitute it with X. Like, it just doesn't work like that. And the gratitude that I have is for our customer base, both on the wholesale front and on the consumer front, because they appreciate that. That is what we are here for. We're the conduit. We're here to simplify their access to the finest artisans that are producing this craft all over the world, regardless of where they come from. So when we went to them, we said, just much like many of my colleagues here, this is not on you. This is not something we are here to pass on you. There's no way that you were able to, make accommodations where you are financially. And actually, one of our actions was to create a memorandum for all of them that would show sort of a pattern of historical experience that we've had with the pandemic, with the previous Trump tariffs, with the 2008 crash that we have actually all lived through. And much like Emily was saying, we were really, really grateful because all those times we found these products to be resilient in the end. Now, it wasn't easy. It was a lot of turmoil, a lot of hard work, but ultimately we were able to offer reassurances and commitment that we were not going to abandon them, that we were not going to ask for them to compensate, and that the American consumer, it will take time, education, effort, energy, work, a lot of things that we talked about. There's a lot of work to do, but they're going to show up for you. They're going to show up for you just like they did before. And I think it offered just a breath of relief, along with the actual representation of what these tariffs are and what they mean, because there was so much mass confusion. In fact, I have a really heartwarming story with one of my producers. Less than 24 hours, took the memo into their bank, which was very uncomfortable with what was going on with all of their eggs in this basket. And they were able to extend their loans based on the assurances that they received from us. So, it gives me that kind of hope that, I can truly say that the artisan consumer is here to offer the support. And we're proof of that. And so that's been reassuring. There are so many additional things that are impacting the way that we're looking at the situation. Although tariffs are one, I think there's been so much talk, of course, about the uncertainty and the economic climate right now. One of the bigger things that I don't think we've covered yet that we're experiencing is the impact that it's having on the value of the dollar. So one of the biggest challenges that we've had is not so much that 10% tariff, which again, we're dealing on a case-by-case basis. When we're an exclusive supplier for someone or an exclusive distributor for a brand in the States, we will do everything in our human power to try to absorb some of that. Now, much like Emily, we're the intermediary. There is not a lot to work with by design, right? And of course, our producers know that, and they are so grateful for the opportunity to even have a seat at the table. So we're working through that as much as we can. But what's made this really, really challenging is the currency fluctuation. And all of a sudden, when we talked about maybe some kind of a nominal price increase for tariffs, we have to overshoot that but to adjust for the falling dollar, depending on what country I'm working with. So that's been a real huge challenge. And on top of that, when we're talking about chocolate and cacao specifically, let's of course talk again about the cacao pricing aspect that's been mentioned numerous times, but my experience with that has been actually more recent. A lot of the smaller craft chocolate companies that we work with have been fairly insulated, you could say, during that first wave of the spike. And so we weren't seeing a lot of changes right away. We saw them with the big guys. Some of the bigger guys that we have in our book, we did not see those until actually the end of the year and the beginning of this year. So we are now dealing with this triple threat of adjusting for cacao price, adjusting for currency, and adjusting for tariffs. And my challenge is, how do I communicate that to my customers? And to Bhavani's point, that I thought was very powerful, there are a lot of interesting, potentially bad actors who are taking advantage of this and also driving the prices up artificially. And now it's just a really, really challenging time, because how is the customer supposed to know? To that end, we have done as much education as we can with the channels we have. For example, on the Caputo's website, my husband, co-owner, Matt Caputo, we do a customer-facing sort of real take that I think could be helpful because it speaks to the consumer and explains really what is our plan, what you can expect. And we did the same thing with a more internal announcement, both video and text, to our wholesale customer base. Because as you can imagine, everyone is, and I mean, I had responses anywhere from the sheer panic to, I think I'm going to have to close my doors, which is another, thing that I think is not often discussed. These are small businesses. Most of our customer base are small independents, and when you see exceptions being carved out to these tariffs for, manufacturing or electronics, it really adds insult to injury when I see the small mom and pop that can't sustain this even another month, and don't have the luxury of waiting and seeing where, how this all shakes out. They've got to make the call now. And many of them, like Emily said, even in our book, have had to shut their doors as manufacturers. Tragic stuff happening in a very short-term basis. But yeah, then I had, the other range of a customer who said, absolutely not. As a policy, any price change as a result of the tariff, we simply vehemently refuse. Okay, well, that's an interesting position to take. But, I've had a really wide range, and you obviously want to cater as much as you possibly can to all of your customers. So we've gone out there, and as a general kind of umbrella rule, we have told our customers that we are doing everything that we can to hold prices steady. We are definitely prioritizing in the order of what's incoming and is on the boat and is getting ready for clearance. We've verified that now that it's been cleared, there is an additional 10% on top of the previous sector tariff. And we are analyzing it case by case, and then hopefully having some in reserve to offset the price change to you. We don't have much in reserve. We run a very tight ship, so we try not to overstock, like I think a lot of our folks have talked about. So there's not a lot to work with, but regardless, our kind of overall takeaway has been to expect to see a modest price increase anywhere from 0 to 10% in the next 30 to 90 days, to give them some kind of an assurance, because that is kind of the range we're working within. And thankfully to date, we have had one official price notification that went out. That is a chocolate maker, a chocolate vendor, that was a result of tariffs that is now getting passed on directly to a U.S. company in effectively a form of a tax, like Emily talked about. No ifs, ands, or buts. I have nothing to give. The producer has nothing to give. They shouldn't have anything to give. And this is the reality of where this policy has gotten us. Silver linings, I think lots of them. Certainly loved hearing some of the unique perspectives that were offered on the panel, many of which I haven't even considered, which I thought was just incredible, and I was jotting them down because I do think we need that. For us, I think the biggest takeaway is that this enables us to really distinguish ourselves. we kind of thrive in opportunities where we have a platform, much like Ori was speaking about, with the types of, ethical, sustainable, and principled beliefs that we all carry so near and dear. Sometimes those are so easy to get, muddled, and with all the greenwashing that's happening in big corporate, corporations all over the world, it's harder and harder to do. I think a moment like this really creates a platform and an opportunity for us to be heard, and really to get the American consumer to support the small artisans from all over the world, regardless of where they come from, because this is just not how we're made. This is not how we will go down. And there's just a lot of resiliency. In the customer base and the product mix, and we intend to be here for it and to see it through.
Yelena, thank you so much. That was Yelena Caputo's Priori Distribution and Caputo's. I would like to invite my colleague Anne to summarize her thoughts, perhaps post a question to the panel or just a commentary. I might have a question, but I certainly want to give Anne the priority here.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think I feel a little bit like Yelena. It was so interesting to hear all the different perspectives. I mean, obviously there was a lot of synergy in the points that you brought up, but a lot of unique perspectives that I just didn't even think of. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind is, how can we keep the conversation going? How do we bring in more voices? And I don't know if any of you have any offhanded thoughts, but that's something that I will be thinking of, is can we keep this conversation going? Because it's not only important for all of you and your small businesses to navigate the situation and see how the dust settles, but also from the perspective of HCP, I'm always thinking about the farmers on the ground and how it's impacting them. So maybe a two-part question: how do we keep this going? And then also, I would maybe more towards Emily, how is the feeling on the ground with the farmers? How are they taking this uncertain time? Is it impacting them?
Excellent. I would like to invite us as we go, Emily, then I will jump over to Ori, then Yelena and Bhavani. Emily, please.
Sure, yeah, and I can take maybe the second part first. So, I should say as well, we've also made the commitment that we are not going to be lowering prices to exporters or farmers that we source from because of these tariffs. So they should not bear any responsibility for this reckless trade policy. So that's, being, I think, able to communicate that to our partners has been a relief for them, but they are still, small businesses that are aware of also the importance of consumer disposable income and economic certainty for demand to continue for the chocolates that are made from their beans. So I think, I was really inspired, and I guess in my own way kind of relieved to hear when I was in Belize last week, for example, that the Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Agriculture immediately set up meetings, in-person meetings with all exporters in the country to determine a pathway forward. And they're starting to look at alternative markets. They're looking at, how they can focus on other markets outside of the United States. And so I think that's a pathway that a lot of producers are exploring now, is, how to diversify their sales.
And I'm happy to share. I think that like we've been, I think initially when you think about this, you're like, oh my God, this is happening to me. And then you think about it and you're like, oh my God, this is happening to everyone. And there's been so much strength in other businesses. I think for two things. One is to kind of share. Some people are good at e-commerce, some people are good at wholesale, some people are good at bulk and manufacturing and all that. So like I have a group of 3 or 4 other CPG company founders. We call it For Food's Sake. And we kind of meet once a month and just kind of share what's going on. And so I think that actually even these informal, like just bring 4 or 5 other companies together and just have open-ended talk to see what's going on. The other really nice thing about this is that it's led to like kind of some collaboration ideas. So for example, one of the things is like maybe you've just been selling chocolate, but we know that we can make more margin if we make bigger orders. So maybe you can convince customers to like buy a holiday bundle. Maybe you can work with a company that can make a chocolate sauce, that can make a cookies, I mean, whatever. And all of a sudden, instead of selling chocolate, you're selling all these other things where the majority of the value add is domestically, which will help kind of offset that. So all I'm saying is I've really leaned hard into other entrepreneurs in this case, and it's been so helpful. I feel like there's no secrets in our industry, and the more that we talk about it, we're all trying to solve somewhere around the same things around cost and sourcing and distribution, where we buy packaging and all of that. And so just, I think there's strength in numbers here. And so either through some of these excellent organizations that are already in touch with so many other entrepreneurs, or even just across your network, you can just informally bring some people in, even if you chat once a week for 15 minutes to just be like, hey, how's everybody doing? I think that you'll pretty quickly find a lot of benefits come out of it.
Yelena, I don't know if you have any thoughts over there.
Nothing much to share. Definitely agree with the sentiment from both Emily and Ori. I think I'm really curious about the consumer vantage point, and I don't know, what the best way to go about soliciting something like that. That would be something interesting, and perhaps organization like yours could help drive that kind of research to see where do they fall on the spectrum.
Thank you so much, Yelena. Bhavani, any thoughts about making this also a more inclusive dialogue representation?
Yeah, I think the one, I agree with everybody, all the comments that's been heard. The one idea that really sticks out to me is, getting close to your consumer and understanding what's really happening with them. And to Ori's point, having a good B2C model and being able to communicate directly with them and see what's going on, getting the pulse. In the end, consumer is the one who puts food on your table, and to be able to understand where they are at and what's going on with them, and to be able to capture that feeling and also to understand their needs and how you can fill those needs is how what's going to drive our business, I think. And to Ori's point, we're also thinking more of, we used to have sales through Amazon and things like that. We pulled it back. We want to have the direct relationship to the consumer, not through another intermediary. And I completely agree. Having that closer connection with the consumer really, really helps to make the right decisions, and also to give you a way of how to move forward in this very turbulent environment.
Thank you so much all for your time. I'm going to summarize the 3 points I think that we collected from all of you today. The first one is, this is not working for the intended purpose of bringing back American jobs or incentivizing American agriculture. As a matter of the opposite, you mentioned moving to Mexico, setting up shop in Europe, and you being all Star Spangler Banner Americana businesses, having very much operations center around employing people in the United States. This is going to be the first line of defense that you possibly will take were these measures to continue. The second is, you see a silver lining, and the silver lining, it continues to be in this personalization. This continues to be in this transparency in which not only consumers, but also other players in the supply chain are able to know your numbers, but also coordinate impossible solutions. And the third one that I see is, the four of you are consistently very flexible and move quite faster. And I might be worried about, bigger enterprises in the United States. Seems that Ori, Emily, Yelena, Bhavani, you all agree with this. You're able to do tailor-measured emergency response rather than the other type of organizations within the US. I'm also gonna take just as an advocate of mental health, specifically in the business space, that if we say, a glass of wine keeps the doctor away, a glass of wine a day keeps the doctor away, I think in these times that we're seeing an emergence of non-alcoholic beverages, a nap keeps the endocrinologist away. It's no longer more psychologists and psychiatrists. I think the endocrinologists need to be in these stressful times up there. Just because that will also bring a lot of certainty and a lot of calm, specifically for you business leaders that have people under you, not only directly in an office next to you or within the continuous US or in the nation, but also all your suppliers in all corners of the world. So thank you so much for being leaders. My question will be just is raise your hand. Can we meet in 70 days and see either how we're going to continue battling perhaps talking about business possibilities, or I also can have someone from real estate from Spain and Mexico join us to show us a couple of options of headquarters that we can have, a beachside front. I'm pretty sure we can find completely solutions. Thank you, Ori. Thank you so much for your patience, and I will pass it on to Anne. I had the privilege of opening, and Anne, I would love if you can close us up for today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just to add on to my original sentiments, thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear from all of you. I think that everyone listening will have be enlightened so many ways, like I was listening in. And we are so grateful to be a part of this community and to be able to share this information and work together. So thank you.